It's the third Saturday in October, so you know what that means. It's time for Alabama and Tennessee, one of college football's more underrated rivalry games. And this year's edition of Bama and Tennessee is massive. It's a game that practically serves as a college football playoff elimination game, as both of these teams already have a loss on their record and have not looked very impressive over the last 2 weeks. This game is huge in Knoxville on Saturday afternoon, and we're going to break it all down for you right now and share our projected winner. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, guys. We're so glad you could join us today. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below. That includes our expert picks, some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country, beating out over 80% of the national handicappers each of the last 6 years. We are on an 8-2 run in our best bets right now. We're hitting over 66% of our bets in the NFL best bet section. So if you want to win big with us, this is the place for you. If you want a place that offers you a full year-long subscription for a very low price, this is the place for you. Other handicappers want to offer you a big fee for 1 week's worth of picks, 1 day's worth of picks. We don't play that game. We want you to sign up and win big with us. We want you to become a member of our GE Nation. We want to do it at one of the most affordable and reasonable prices and offers out there. So go check it out. The link for that down in the description below. Help us out. Help yourself out by signing up on thegridironexpert.com. So Alabama and Tennessee. Let's talk history first. Alabama, of course, has dominated this series. They've won 16 of the last 17 matchups against the Volunteers, although they did lose the last time they came to Knoxville. Arguably the game of the year in 2022, losing 52-49, Tennessee kicking that game-winning field goal as time expired. Last year, Alabama got the revenge, but they started very slow, trailed 20-7 at halftime before rallying to win 34-20, shutting out the Volunteers in the second half. You take a look at what we've seen so far this year from number 7 Alabama, number 11 Tennessee, a top 11 matchup Saturday afternoon. We said both these teams have underperformed the last 2 weeks, and that's absolutely been the case. Alabama was shockingly upset against Vanderbilt after beating Georgia the week prior, and then really we thought they'd all backed it up with a big win against South Carolina last week, and they didn't. That game coming down to the final seconds, only beating the Gamecocks by 2. Tennessee, they lost to Arkansas the same day that Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. We thought the Volunteers would follow that up with a big home win against Florida. That was not the case. They only beat the Gators 23-17 in overtime, and that was at Neyland Stadium. So neither team has looked great the last 2 weeks, which makes this game even more intriguing than it already was. Who's going to walk away with a victory and keep their playoff hopes alive? Who's going to lose and possibly see their playoff hopes come to an end? Take a look at the offense. We'll start with Alabama. They're averaging over 440 yards per game, and they're pretty balanced. Over 263 passing yards per game, nearly 180 rushing yards per game. So we have seen a Bama team that knows how to be balanced. We haven't seen a Bama team that has shown the capability and the ability to be explosive, but lately it's been hit or miss. You know, you never know what kind of Bama offense you're going to get. They looked great in the first half against Georgia, then stalled out in the second half. They put up a lot of points on Vanderbilt, but their defense didn't do them any justice, and the offense made a handful of mistakes. South Carolina struggled to move the ball, especially in the into the second quarter. Made a lot of mistakes there with the safety and the interception. So Jalen Milroe is going to have himself a big game in Knoxville. He's a Heisman contender, over 1,400 passing yards and 12 touchdowns, over 300 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns, so 23 total touchdowns on the year already for Jalen Milroe. Jam Miller has been great at running back. Ryan Williams has been unbelievable at wide receiver. The 17-year-old has 576 reception yards on 23 receptions. That's it. For 6 touchdowns, which means half of the passing touchdowns from Jalen Milroe have gone to Ryan Williams, which obviously shows how big of a target he is, how explosive of a playmaker he is. But we mentioned decision-making. Alabama's got to do a better job of just playing smarter football. The Crimson Tide have turned the ball over 9 times already this season. 9 times already this season. That included 2 against Vanderbilt, which led to 13 points for the Commodores, and then 2 last week against South Carolina, which only led to 3 points for the Gamecocks. Luckily, they also had that safety as well. Keep in mind, Jalen Milroe, he had the safety last week against South Carolina. One of the turnovers against Vanderbilt was a strip sack. He's a mobile quarterback. He's got to have better pocket awareness. He's got to do a better job of scrambling and extending plays. You know, you cannot sit in the pocket and allow Tennessee to pressure you and obviously have negative plays like that. So decision-making and ball security are going to be massive for Alabama in this game. Tennessee, on the other hand, we know their offense is good. They're averaging nearly 500 yards per game, including 246.5 on the ground, but I want to say this. I think Tennessee, they've stat padded a little bit. You go look at the beginning of their season. They're playing, Chattanooga and Kent State and guys like that. Over the last few weeks, they have not looked that great offensively. Against Arkansas, they were held to just 332 yards and 14 points. Only had 158 passing yards in that game. Last week against Florida, even worse. They only mustered 300 yards of offense, only 157 through the air, and mustered only 23 points in a game where they trailed 10-0 for, midway through the third quarter, and then had to battle back to win it in overtime. Nico Iamaleava is fantastic. He's a great quarterback. Over 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. Dylan Sampson is one of the best running backs in the country. Almost 700 yards already this year, 15 rushing touchdowns for Sampson. They've got to find a way to establish the run in this game against Alabama, get back to their roots. They've got to find a way to open up the pass for Nico Iamaleava, who has struggled against quality opponents. Did not play very great against Oklahoma, did not play great against Arkansas, did not play great against Florida. So it's one thing if you're beating up on Chattanooga and a bad NC State team and a bad Kent State team. It's another thing when you're struggling against these SEC defenses, which they have done each of the last 3 games. But they also have to protect him, right? Tennessee has to do a better job of what they're doing on the offensive line. Again, against their weaker opponents, offensive line looked great. But Tennessee has given up 13 sacks this year. 10 of them have come in the last 3 games against Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Florida. So against the better quality opponents, these SEC caliber defenses, Tennessee's offensive line has not held up very well. Nico Iamaleava has not held up very well. The offense as a whole has not held up very well. Will that change against Alabama's defense on Saturday? Well, the Crimson Tide's defense, luckily for Tennessee, isn't all that great. I would call them mediocre. They're giving up 342 yards per game. That's not bad. 213 through the air, 129 on the ground. None of that is bad, right? None of those marks are horrible marks and shows Alabama's a bad defense or anything like that, but they're not a Nick Saban-led defense. They're not one of the best defenses in the country, let alone in the SEC. And if you take a look at a little bit deeper, the Crimson Tide have played in 6 games this year. In 4 of those 6 games, they've allowed at least 130 rushing yards. At least 130 rushing yards in 4 of those games. That includes 132 last week to South Carolina. That includes 166 the week before in their loss against Vanderbilt. Yes, the defensive line has 14 sacks on the year, so maybe they can create a little pressure on Nico. They forced 12 turnovers on the year, 4 of those coming against South Carolina, although the Crimson Tide really didn't take much advantage of them. 4 of those coming against Georgia, they did take advantage of them then. But the 2 keys, or really I should say 3 keys, for Alabama on Saturday are this. Number 1, stopping the run. Nico Iamaleava has proven he really can't torch these SEC defenses. I don't think that's going to happen now against Alabama. So stop the run. Make sure Tennessee cannot establish the run and bully you in the line of scrimmage. That's number 1 for Alabama defensively. Number 2 is you've got to have a multi-turnover game like they did against South Carolina, like they did against Georgia. If they can force a couple interceptions off of Nico, a couple fumbles, they're going to take, I believe Alabama will convert off of those. Multi-turnover game, converting off of those, they win this game. And then finally, discipline. Alabama has been extremely undisciplined, uncharacteristically undisciplined for this program, especially when it comes to penalties. 6 games, Alabama has been penalized 47 times for 433 yards. They're averaging 72 penalty yards per game. They cannot allow themselves to back up their own offense and make it a second and third long situation because of self-inflicted wounds. They cannot allow Tennessee to extend drives because of stupid penalties. We've seen that time and time again from Alabama this year. They have to play an extremely disciplined game, lower the amount of penalties, especially when you're going to one of the most toughest environments to play in the country at Neyland Stadium for a game like this. You've got to be better if you're Alabama. Tennessee, defensively, they're pretty good, but again, you look good when you play a bad NC State team, Chattanooga, Kent State, guys like that. Their defense has been solid against Arkansas, held them to 19. Florida held them to 17. Oklahoma, held them to 15. That game could have been a lot worse if Josh Heupel had kept his foot on the gas. They've got the number 2 defense in the country statistically, giving up just 249.8 yards per game, only 170 through the air, less than 80 rushing yards per game on the ground. But the last 2 games, their secondary has concerned me. The last 2 games against Arkansas and Florida, I've been concerned with their secondary. Against the Razorbacks, they gave up 297 passing yards in that game. Against Florida, 223 passing yards in those games. And those numbers could have been a little bit more had both, how weird is this, both quarterbacks for Arkansas and Florida go down. Taylon Green gets hurt in the Razorback in the Arkansas game. Graham Mertz gets hurt in the Florida game. So very interesting there. Those numbers could be a little bit different, but regardless, those quarterbacks were putting up pretty good numbers against the Tennessee secondary that didn't seem to have an answer for them. So if you are Tennessee, you have to find a way to contain Jalen Milroe. You got to find a way to shut down Ryan Williams. That dynamic duo, that connection, you cannot allow him to go off and off and off again and again and again. You've got to find a way to contain Milroe. You've got to find a way to put pressure on him. You got to find a way to keep him in the pocket. That's where he struggles. He wants to move. He wants to scramble. He wants to extend plays. Don't let him do that. If you do that defensively, if you can shut him down, you will win this game. So a lot is at stake here on Saturday, guys. Big-time rivalry game, top 11 matchup, potential playoff berths on the line. I know the season's far from over, but getting 2 losses this early in the year, especially with difficult schedules ahead for both teams. Alabama still has to play LSU, Auburn for some, Missouri still, Tennessee still got a game against Georgia in there. Maybe Vanderbilt will be tough. This is a big game for both programs, and to me, it really is a toss-up. Because of how poorly both these teams have looked and played each of the last 2 weeks, it's really hard to get a gauge on what's going to happen on Saturday afternoon. But I'm going to have to go, and again, it really just feels like a 50-50 coin flip game to me, but I'm going to go with Tennessee. I'm going to go with the Volunteers here. And a big reason for that is the lack of discipline that I've seen from Alabama. I did not like what I saw from them at all against South Carolina. I really thought that team would come out firing on all cylinders, and they didn't. Against a bad South Carolina team, too. So I didn't like that. And secondly, Knoxville, man. Neyland Stadium is a tough place to play. It is going to be loud. It is going to be electric. And if this Bama team, can struggle at Vanderbilt, even struggled at their own home stadium last week at South Carolina, I worry about penalties. I worry about mistakes in this type of environment. So give me Tennessee, who I think can get a little bit of ground game going. Alabama's rushing defense hasn't been great. Tennessee establishes the run. They set up some easy pitch and catches for Nico Iamaleava. The defense does their job. More specifically, the home crowd does their job. Tennessee gets the win. They crack into the top 10. They take down Alabama, and the Crimson Tide will take their second loss of the year by mid-October. Things not really getting off to a great start in the post-Nick Saban era. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below. That includes our website, thegridironexpert.com, home of those exclusive expert picks. Some of the best picks in the entire country, beating out over 80% of the national handicappers. You do not want to miss out on those. Again, the link for that down in the description below. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.